Your camera off for now.
Mhm.
Hello, and welcome to Unity of Fredericksburg. My name is Linda, and I'm pleased to welcome all of you to the Unity of Fredericksburg weekly online gathering. At Unity of Fredericksburg, we are advancing the movement of spiritual awakening and transformation through unity, a positive path for spiritual living. We thank those of you watching on YouTube, live or later, and invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're able to attend live, we encourage you to join us in the Zoom community room for the full Sunday morning experience, including music, prayer, and connection. Our weekly newsletter includes the Sunday service link, and you can subscribe to receive that on our website at uofva.org. For everyone local to Central Virginia, Unity of Fredericksburg offers a variety of fun and enriching in-person gatherings every month. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter at uofva.org for all the details. Our message and meditation today comes from Reverend Kelly Isola, an ordained Unity minister. Kelly is a master at creating transformative retreats, rituals, ceremonies, and alternative services using music, storytelling, laughter, tears, and meditation as catalysts for spiritual transformation. She also facilitates board trainings and leadership development workshops and retreats. Kelly is sought after as a captivating, funny, inspiring, and charismatic speaker and teacher. Kelly partners with faith communities and nonprofit organizations to move through times of change efficiently, effectively, and with sustainable results. We are delighted to have Kelly as our speaker today. And now, here's Reverend Kelly.
It's always a treat to hear someone read your bio because you're like, and I've said this a gajillion times, but it's like, okay, so she sounds pretty cool. I think I want to be her. Or sometimes it's, no pressure, no pressure, you know. Um, and I don't actually ever feel pressure. I usually have a little bit of nervous, but that's just creative energy, right? When you step into doing something that you might not be familiar with, there's some, nervous energy around it. And today, a little bit of that creative energy is, my title was This Isn't Working Like We Think It Is, which kind of brings a lot of things to mind for people. Like what? What isn't working like we think it is? Well, I'm going to tell you. And you might want to be sitting down because, in my usual fashion, I'm going to afflict someone's comfort. I'm going to sort of tease some things apart and unravel some unconscious, unexamined assumptions. But I want to start with my grandmother's iron. My grandmother, two grandmothers, but the one in particular I'm thinking about, she wasn't a spiritual teacher. She wasn't a mystic. She just, grandmother married, six children, and every Sunday evening she ironed clothes. And she would sprinkle water on the wrinkled shirts before pressing them. And so I asked her why. One time I asked her why she wet them first, because I'm thinking, doesn't that make it harder? Like, aren't you trying to like press the wrinkles out? Wouldn't the water? I'm little, so I'm not connecting the dots yet. And she looked at me and she smiled and she said, "Some things only smooth out with moisture and heat together." And at the time, I thought, okay. And then as the years go on, and every time I would iron something, which I have to tell you has become less and less as I grow older. Several decades ago, I stopped buying clothes that required ironing and dry cleaning. Right. I encourage you to do that. It's self care. um, but the idea of some things only smooth out with moisture and heat together, kind of stayed with me. And it's not like I thought about it a lot, or kind of but once in a while it would float in and out. And as I got older and kind of got into to my own growth and then into ministry, It really kind of was chewing away at the back of my brain because most of us were actually taught the opposite. We were taught that wrinkles in life should be taken care of, right? They should be flattened. Um, they should be removed immediately. What are the thoughts I'm holding that I have these wrinkles in life, um, and so the idea of having moisture and heat together, and using that as a metaphor, um, you know, just slowly was eating away, not eating away, but chewing at my brain. Um, and we've sort of learned in our spiritual practices to, attack is probably too strong a word, but oh, what's that thought? There must be thoughts that are making these wrinkles, right? Or what am I doing? Or what am I not doing? Or what are my prayers? Or what are my denials and affirmation? Like there's something amiss because these wrinkles are here. And you can substitute wrinkle with any word you'd like. Challenge, some big tissue issues, some not so much. But maybe there's some things that don't soften through the pressure. But that's kind of our fix it spirituality in New Thought in Unity is there is a pressure. And if you're telling yourself, no, there isn't, just sit tight because I'm going to unpack that a little bit. So the wrinkles don't soften through pressure alone. Maybe they require some tenderness first. Maybe what we've been calling a spiritual practice has sometimes become another iron that's pressing harder on an already exhausted soul. I don't know about you, but I certainly regularly feel exhausted, or I often use the word soul weary. And I know lots of people around me in that same place. And we just sort of keep plowing through it. And exhausted for a lot of reasons that I'm not going to list. But I think many people understand that idea of what I'm talking about. And maybe what we've been doing isn't working like we think it is. Um, I certainly know people, and I've been one of them, where you can't really tell the difference between spiritual practice and anxiety management, right? Just sit with that for a minute. Can I tell the difference between spiritual practice and anxiety management? Every thought gets monitored, right? And we certainly can beat each other up with that one. Well, what are you holding in consciousness? By the way, don't ever say that to me if you want me to talk to you again. But we monitor our thoughts, right? We evaluate our emotions, assuming we can name them and we're allowing ourselves to feel them. Um, we, we might call a day a bad day. And was it really a bad day or this piece of it? And if it was a bad day, we're interpreting it as opposed to just allowing it to be. Every diagnosis gets spiritualized. We have this practice of, well, what does this mean? It must mean something. And I'm kind of like now where I've grown is why does it have to mean anything? Why can't it just be? Rather than saying, well, what belief, caused this or brought this into my life? What thoughts am I holding, right? What am I doing wrong or not well enough? Is it, are my denials and affirmations off? Does my prayer work need adjusting? Do I need to fix something? Um, and sometimes I just wonder if, if we're actually praying or are we auditing ourselves? If we're monitoring thoughts, if we're evaluating emotions and putting meaning on everything, it seems like more of an audit. And so, one of the most difficult things for me to say about all of this is that I have watched people use Unity teachings to become cruel to themselves or mean spirited, maybe is a better word. Unity has some beautiful teachings, and still they've been turned into weapons. Like if I were more spiritual, I wouldn't feel whatever. Or if I had enough faith, XYZ wouldn't be happening. Or if I really practice this truth, capital T, or this divine law, if I really understood it, if I really practiced it, there would be some healing going on in my life right now. And there's a whole lot of other sentences like that that rattle around, and oftentimes very unconsciously. And it's not liberation; it's fear, but it's speaking the language of metaphysics fluently. It's fear that's speaking metaphysics fluently. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody does all of this all the time. And what I know from being out and about in the Unity movement for 20 years is it goes on more than you might imagine. Because part of that, all of that little brief description also includes not telling the truth about experiencing that. And so, this isn't working like we think it is. Not that it never works, but it's not working. I don't think it's working to the capacity that we think it is. We've kind of turned our spirituality, if you go back and listen to the things I said, it's like I said auditing, but it's like self surveillance. Like I have a checklist. Well, I looked at my thoughts. What are my feelings? And there's this blah, 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 right? It's a little bit of self surveillance. Unity has a very powerful teaching. Thought matters, consciousness matters. Our inner life shapes our outer life. Absolutely. Don't disagree with any of that. It's incredibly powerful. It's true. But somewhere along the way, many people have moved from responsibility into self surveillance, and they're not the same thing. And I can tell when it's self surveillance when someone is afraid to say, well, I've done this and I've done that, but I'm not experiencing, what I was hoping, right? Or I'm not experiencing, I had this intention for something and I'm not experiencing that. Responsibility says, I participate in my life. Self surveillance says, I monitor myself, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I'm doing, to make sure that I'm healing, to make sure that I deserve it, to make sure that there's proof of healing. And so now every struggle actually becomes evidence. Am I still anxious? Am I still grieving? Am I still sick? Am I still afraid? Am I still lonely? Am I still exhausted? Which translates to, well, then I must be failing somewhere, failing spiritually. And again, I'm not saying everybody all the time. Yet I think most all of us have experienced some form of this throughout, our journey. And then all of that, right? That self monitoring, that self surveillance now quietly like slips in under your awareness and it becomes pressure. Pressure enters the body, not inspiration. So there's the energy of correcting, there's the energy of performing, there's the energy of monitoring, um, there's the energy of trying to get ourselves right enough or in alignment with this divine principle, or in alignment with this law, or in alignment with something, in order to demonstrate, to manifest, to prove whatever the outcome is that you're looking for. And that's just pressure. So that's, to me, that's just more exhaustion. Um, I think it's one of the reasons that we're tired. It's not because we don't love truth. It's not because, you know, there's any of those things aren't true. But we've been kind of using truth against ourselves. It's this really vicious cycle. So I don't think it's really working like we think it is. What we've learned is to abandon ourselves in pain. We have. Again, not everybody, not all the time, but think about it. And I know everyone sitting here and anywhere I go that we have been taught, whether in new thought communities, whether just our culture, our family systems, we have been learned to, or have we've been taught to abandon ourselves when we're in pain. So we suffer twice. First, from whatever the challenge was, right? The speed bump, the whatever we want to call it. So first from that, and then from how we interpret it. I should know better. This should be, I should be able to demonstrate this sooner. I must be blocking something. What are the thoughts that I'm holding that are in the way that I need to smooth over, right? What's wrong with me? Why do I still feel like this? And on and on and on and on. And some of those sentences are very, very insidious. It can be very quiet. Like that one, I should know better. That's a pretty direct. And sometimes it sounds more like, I've heard this before. I've experienced, why aren't I doing this differently? That's like quietly allowing pressure in. And so now our burden becomes doubled because we have the initial pain and now we've added some shame or self-judgment or embarrassment, spiritual pressure, right? Well, what am I not doing right with my denials and affirmations? What's why is I've prayed, right? I pray with people. And what I will tell you is that pressure rarely heals what tenderness can reach. Pressure rarely heals what tenderness can reach. Just hold that for a moment because we're going to go down that road. Sometimes anxiety is not failure. Sometimes it's the body refusing erasure. What do I mean by that? You ever have your body resisting something? Like there's some anxiety or discomfort around something, and the mind thinks that because there's this anxiety or discomfort or problem, whatever we want to call it, going on, that we're failing at something. And again, it isn't always a conscious thought. And there's this, and the body is sort of resisting and pushing back. And maybe the body is doing that so that you don't abandon yourself, right? Because that's what we've been taught, is how to abandon ourselves when we're in pain. Sometimes exhaustion, that soul weariness, is not weakness. Sometimes it's protest. It's the body saying, excuse me, nope, stop, time out. It's protesting. The body has, a batch in the body with a little sign protesting, walking down the street. And I don't know what the sign says. That's up to you. Sometimes going numb. Have you ever gone numb in a troubling situation? It's protection. And sometimes the body raises its voice, right? If you've ever resisted some kind of challenge And the body sort of gets, why is my body getting so, like, you can feel it contracting, or my shoulders are feel even more achy. And that's the body raising its voice, because you disappearing is becoming too dangerous. The body's not attacking you. Sometimes it's trying to keep you from abandoning yourself. We don't just feel discomfort, we disappear from ourselves in it. We override ourselves, we correct ourselves, we shame ourselves, we push past ourselves, and then we call it growth. And then there's Myrtle Fillmore. She spoke to her body like it was worthy of kindness. She didn't have tuberculosis. She didn't heal herself of tuberculosis in 2 years. She had a lot of different ailments and symptoms, and she worked at tenderness. She offered companionship instead of correction. She and Charles Fillmore were radically different, two very different theologies that are not interchangeable. But I know many of us have heard that Myrtle spoke to her body with words of kindness. Can you imagine? There was no fixing, there was no monitoring, there was no looking at your thoughts, there was no fighting, there was no saying, "Oh, I probably didn't do something right, or my spiritual practice is off." She never did any of that. Just care and kindness. Just care and kindness. That's all. She didn't go to her thoughts first. She went to her body first. Where in my body do I feel this discomfort? And that's where she would direct the words of kindness. That's where she would direct the tenderness. It was never about the thoughts, not at first. Most of us are familiar with her affirmation when she first, in the late 1870s, um, Charles and Myrtle were doing kind of like what we're doing, right? Finding things out, learning new things, developing themselves. Oh, I didn't know I was thinking this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to practice this. I'm going to stop doing that. Or I'm not going to, just learning as they're going, just like you and I. And those are the things that show up in Myrtle's letters. I've spent a lot of years in the archives reading letters. And my favorite part about it is that what I get out of the archives is the letter that someone wrote in and the letter that Myrtle wrote back. So you get a whole conversation. Unfortunately, the two books of Myrtle Fillmore's Healing Letters and How to Let God Help You, the letters that are in those are simply Myrtle's response to somebody. You don't get to see the letter that someone wrote in. So unfortunately, it's like reading somebody's mail, right? It's incomplete at best. So most of us are familiar with her affirmation that she heard early on in her, as she started to learn new things. As a child of God, I do not inherit sickness. As a child of God, I do not inherit sickness. Unfortunately, over the century, that has been taken on by Unity as if it's an affirmation, as if it's a demand, and that if you are sick, you're not supposed to be, because you don't inherit sickness, which is not what she was saying at all. She didn't say anything about causing it. She didn't say anything about her thoughts creating it. She didn't say anything about failed spirituality. All she was doing was reclaiming her identity. All she was doing is saying that this condition is not my deepest truth. She wasn't denying the condition, she was holding it. She was allowing space for it and reminding herself that there's more of me. I have this illness. Many of the things she wrote about today we would call asthma, irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, arthritis. But that's what she was doing. Is when she would say that, as a child of God, I do not inherit sickness. It was like, oh, right, life is still here. It was about care. right? It was coming home and about care, and that her condition is not the whole of her. And that's very different from blaming. That's very different from, well, what thoughts am I holding? What's my prayer practice saying? It's very different than that. She also said there's no incurable disease, and not, and again, that's one of those that's gotten twisted over the decades and century. She's um, it doesn't mean that people are failures if they aren't quote unquote healed. And there's a difference between healed and cured. But again, that's another rabbit hole. What she's saying is life is larger than this moment. Life is possibility is larger than this fear. Belonging is larger than the diagnosis. That's what that means. There is no incurable disease. It's not it's not this black and white statement. It's an invitation for us to reclaim our identity. Charles, and what unity pretty much has taught for 125 years is Charles's teachings. He taught us how to change thought. Metaphysics is Charles Fillmore, right? That demonstration and manifestation and proof and divine law, all of that is Charles Fillmore, not Myrtle. Myrtle didn't go down that road. Myrtle Fillmore teaches us how to stay with the wrinkles, how to stay with the body, how to stay with the feeling, and stay without condemning. Stay without condemning. You're already loved. You already belong. But healing requires that we stay long enough for life to do what life does. So there's no time frame, there's no vision board, there's nothing to manifest or to demonstrate, there's no destination, there's no forcing, there's no performing spirituality. It's just participating in life. You have a diagnosis, Myrtle is like, bring it home, be in it, bring it home. Life can hold it because it's not the all of you. Notice it. The same thing with feelings. So this week, until we meet again next week, I'm I'm not asking you to think better. I'm not even asking you to pay attention to your thoughts. In fact, I'd prefer that you not. I want us to let's go down the because Myrtle's theology got lost 120 years ago, um, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not dogging on anybody, but it's true. Unity has two theologies, and it's Charles's theology that is what unity is made up of. It's what unity teaches. So I don't want you to notice your thoughts. If you find yourself, okay, well, what am I holding in thought? Stop, stop, just stop yourself right there and just ask. All I want you to do is notice. Noticing doesn't require fixing anything. There's no meaning making going on in noticing. What you're noticing is, where are you still fighting yourself? Where might your body be resisting because it doesn't want you to erase yourself? Where are you treating your pain like an enemy to eliminate, like it's not supposed to be there? Where are you monitoring yourself rather than caring for yourself, rather than being tender? Two very different things. You find yourself going to your head, stop it. You can hear my voice, stop it. And what would happen if you stopped abandoning yourself? That's what Myrtle is inviting us into, to stop abandoning yourself. Life, me, can hold all of it, and it's not the totality of you. Because maybe the most spiritual thing that you can do is to stay, is to just stay. Can you do that? That's all I want you to do this week. If you find yourself bumping up against something, just notice. Ask the body. Myrtle always first went to the body. Always. Where in my body am I feeling this? It was not about denials and affirmations. It was not about the 12 powers. It was not about demonstration and manifestation and divine law. It was about where in my body do I feel it, and what care and tenderness is my body asking for? How can I tend to my body? Let's take that into meditation. Hold that question. How can I tend to my body? Take a deep breath. Take another one. You can have your eyes open. You can have them closed. But just sort of drop yourself into your chair, into your space. Because when we do that, when we drop ourselves, we're cooperating with life, which is Myrtle. She wasn't interested in making something change. What her practice was to restore relationship. Restore relationship. And how to be in what she called right relationship. And so just stay. Take another breath. Is there something in your life that might be a wrinkle? Doesn't have to be anything big. And where in your body do you feel that wrinkle? Is it pressure on your chest, maybe the shoulders? I don't know. But just pause and stay with the body, wherever that is. Myrtle treated the body not as a problem to conquer, to fix, to heal, but as a life to befriend. So that wrinkle in your life, whatever that is, when you find the place in your body, you don't have to correct it. Just be present to it. If you feel in your chest, put your hand there, or your stomach, or your knees, wherever. Put your hand on the place in your body where you feel the discomfort, and just be present. Because we can hold all of life. Because we are life. Charles has taught us how to change thought, how to change outer conditions. Powerful, not meaningless. Yet Myrtle teaches us how to stay with ourselves, which has to be first. So, by asking, where in my body do I feel this? I'm centering life, I'm centering care, and I'm centering wholeness. And so it is. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Kelly, and thank you for watching the weekly broadcast from Unity of Fredericksburg. Visit our website, uofva.org, to learn more about our mission of spiritual awakening and transformation, and support our ministry with your financial donation. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.